Another startup? Really, Sarah? Mom's voice dripped with disappointment over our weekly family dinner. I thought you were past this phase. I pushed my untouched lasagna around my plate, trying to maintain my composure. At 32, I'd launched 3 successful tech companies, but to my parents, I was still their wayward daughter who refused to follow the proper career path. Quantum Solutions isn't just another startup, I explained, though I'd given this speech countless times. We're revolutionizing AI-driven cybersecurity. The technology we're developing could change everything. Dad scoffed, adjusting his global tech corporate badge, the same company he'd loyally served for 25 years. You know what changes everything? A stable job with benefits. Like the position Janet offered you in Global Tech's IT department. Yes, Janet. My older sister, the successful one. Vice President of Information Technology at Global Tech, married to her college sweetheart, perfect house in the suburbs. The daughter who'd followed their carefully planned path to success. Janet's position is entry-level management, I countered. My last company sold for $50 million. And where's that money now? Mom asked pointedly. Sunk into another risky venture? They didn't understand that I'd invested every penny into developing quantum encryption technology that would make current cybersecurity systems obsolete. They couldn't see that while Global Tech was still using outdated security protocols, my team was creating the future. You're not getting any younger, honey, Mom continued. Janet started at the bottom, worked her way up. Now she has stability, respect. And a corner office, Dad added proudly. Did you know Global Tech just promoted her to oversee their entire cybersecurity division? I bit back a laugh. If they only knew what my team had discovered about Global Tech's security vulnerabilities during our market research. My phone buzzed. A message from Alex, my CTO. It's happening. Global Tech's board just saw the penetration test results. They're panicking. Speaking of Janet's cybersecurity division, I said carefully, has she mentioned any issues lately? Dad frowned. What do you mean? Right on cue his phone rang. The caller ID showed Global Tech's CEO's office. His face paled as he answered. Emergency board meeting? Now. He stood up, grabbing his jacket. Sir. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Mom looked worried. Richard, what's wrong? Some kind of security breach, he muttered, already heading for the door. Major one from what Thompson's saying. Janet's been trying to contain it all day. I took a slow sip of wine, watching them scramble. 3 months ago, Global Tech had arrogantly dismissed my team's warning about their system vulnerabilities. We have the best security in the industry, Janet had declared when I tried to show her the weaknesses we'd found. Now they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I should go too, I said, standing up. I have a meeting downtown anyway. A meeting? At this hour? Mom's disapproval was clear. Someone's about to make me a very interesting offer. Dad paused at the door. What kind of offer? I smiled, gathering my things. The kind that changes everything. 2 hours later, I sat in my sleek downtown office, watching Global Tech's stock price plummet in real time. News of their catastrophic security breach had leaked, and the market was responding exactly as we'd predicted. Alex burst in, grinning. Their entire system is locked down. Janet's team can't even access basic functions. The board is losing their minds. And our solution? Ready to deploy. We can have them back online in under an hour. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about all the family dinners where they dismissed my dreams, all the times Janet had patronized my little tech projects. Any word from Thompson? Alex checked his tablet. Global Tech's CEO is on his way up, along with their entire executive team. I stood up, smoothing my designer suit. Perfect. Let's show them what a real job looks like. Global Tech's executive team filed into my conference room like chastened schoolchildren. CEO Thompson, usually the picture of corporate confidence, looked distinctly uncomfortable in his rumpled suit. Janet sat beside him, her face ashen, while Dad hovered near the back, trying to process seeing my name on the executive suite's door. Ms. Walker, Thompson began, his voice strained, thank you for meeting with us at this late hour. Of course, I replied smoothly. Cybersecurity emergencies wait for no one. Isn't that right, Janet? My sister's face flushed. 3 months ago she'd laughed when I warned her about their vulnerabilities. "We have a whole department handling this, Sarah," she'd said dismissively. "We don't need advice from a startup." "Let's cut to the chase," Thompson continued. "Our entire system is compromised. Customer data, financial records, proprietary information, all at risk. Your team's analysis was correct." I pulled up our original security audit on the room's screens. "You mean this analysis? The one Janet said was alarmist and unnecessary?" Dad stepped forward. "Sarah, please. The company's losing millions by the minute." "Actually," I corrected, displaying the real-time stock tracker, "you're losing billions. Your market value has dropped 40% in the last hour. When the Asian markets open in 3 hours, it'll get worse." "We need your help," Thompson said bluntly. "Your quantum encryption technology. It's the only system that could have prevented this." I smiled, remembering all the times my parents had questioned my choices. Interesting how that risky venture doesn't seem so risky now, doesn't it? Janet finally spoke up. "This isn't the time for 'I told you so,' Sarah. We're talking about people's jobs, their livelihoods. Now you care about consequences?" I pulled up more data. "When I showed you these vulnerabilities, I also showed you how many employees' personal data was at risk. You ignored that too." Alex entered with a stack of documents, distributing them to the executive team. "Our proposed solution," he explained. "Complete system overhaul, quantum encryption implementation, and ongoing security management." Thompson flipped to the last page and I saw his eyes widen at the figure. "This is substantial. Premium pricing for premium technology," I said calmly. "Plus an ownership stake in global tech." "Ownership?" Dad sputtered. "You can't be serious." 20%, I stated firmly. "Non-negotiable. We're not just selling you technology, we're saving your company." Janet leaned forward. "And who would manage this implementation?" "My team. Exclusively. Your current cybersecurity division would report directly to Quantum Solutions." The implication hung in the air. Janet would be working for me. "This is extortion," she whispered. "No," I corrected. "This is business. You have exactly 1 hour to decide before we take this offer to your competitors. And believe me, after tonight they're all calling." My phone buzzed. Messages from 3 other major tech companies, all desperately seeking our protection. Funny how a single security breach could turn industry giants into supplicants. Thompson huddled with his team in the corner while I calmly checked emails. Dad approached my desk, looking at me as if seeing me for the first time. "All those startups," he said quietly. "All those risks we told you not to take. You knew, didn't you? You saw this coming." "I tried to tell you," I replied. "Every Sunday dinner, every family gathering. But you and Mom were too busy bragging about Janet's corner office to listen." "Ms. Walker," Thompson interrupted. "We accept your terms." I nodded to Alex, who brought over the final contracts. "Sign here. And here. Initial each page." As the documents circulated, Janet remained frozen in her chair. "What happens to my department?" "Don't worry, sis," I smiled. "We'll find something suitable for your experience level." The next morning, Global Tech's stock rebounded on news of the Quantum Solutions partnership. Financial analysts praised the company's innovative approach to cybersecurity, while tech blogs buzzed about the quantum encryption technology that had just become the industry's new gold standard. I stood in my new office, formerly Thompson's executive suite, watching employees scurry about below. The past week had been a whirlwind of transitions, system implementations, and corporate restructuring. Janet had been reassigned to an advisory position, which basically meant she now reported to my junior team leads. "Your parents are here," Alex announced, appearing at my door. "They're waiting in the main conference room." I took my time walking there, remembering all the Sunday dinners where they'd lectured me about job security and corporate loyalty. Now they were sitting in my conference room in my company, trying to understand how their misguided daughter had become their boss's boss. "Sarah," Mom stood up as I entered, smoothing her dress nervously. "This is quite an office." "Quite a company," I corrected, sitting at the head of the table. "Though I'm sure you didn't come here just to admire the view." Dad cleared his throat. "We've been doing some thinking. About everything we said, Everything we assumed. You mean about how I was wasting my potential? How I needed to grow up and get a real job? I kept my voice level professional. We were wrong, Mom admitted. So wrong. We didn't understand what you were building. No, I agreed. You didn't. And you never tried to. My phone buzzed. Another message from Microsoft CEO, desperately seeking a meeting. After global tech's transformation, every major tech company wanted quantum solutions protection. Janet told us she's being transferred to the satellite office, Dad ventured. In Detroit. Actually, she requested that transfer herself, I replied. Something about wanting to explore new opportunities. The truth was more complicated. Janet couldn't handle reporting to my team, people she dismissed as startup kids just months ago. Her pride wouldn't let her stay and watch her little sister revolutionize the company she'd spent 15 years climbing. You've changed everything, Mom said softly. The whole industry is talking about your technology. I pulled up our latest projections on the room's displays. This is just the beginning. Next month we're launching a global security initiative. Every major tech company will either adopt our standards or become obsolete. And global tech? Dad asked. What happens to all the employees? To their families? You mean, am I going to dismantle the company out of revenge? I smiled slightly. Unlike some people, I can separate business from personal matters. Global tech will prosper, under proper leadership and with superior technology. Alex appeared with more urgent messages. 3 government contracts, 2 multinational banks, and a Silicon Valley giant all wanting meetings. I have to go, I stood up. Unlike some positions, CEO of a global tech firm actually requires attention to detail. Sarah, wait. Mom reached for my hand. We'd like you to come to dinner on Sunday. Janet will be there before she leaves for Detroit. Maybe we could all. Sorry, I cut her off. I'm flying to Singapore tonight. Meeting with Asian tech leaders about implementing our security protocols. Maybe next month, if my schedule allows. As they left, looking somewhat shell-shocked, I returned to my office. The city sprawled below, but my eyes were drawn to the global tech logo now prominently displaying, secured by quantum solutions beneath it. My phone rang. Janet. Hello, sis, I answered. How's the transfer planning going? You're really going through with this, she said, her voice tight. Sending me to Detroit. As I recall, you chose Detroit. We offered you several options. Options, she laughed bitterly. You mean different ways to be humiliated? To watch my little sister dismantle everything I built? No, Janet. I'm building something better. Something you could have been part of if you'd listened 3 months ago. There was a long pause. I should have taken you seriously. Yes, I agreed. You should have. After hanging up, I reviewed the latest system updates. Global Tech's security was now light years ahead of its competitors, thanks to our quantum encryption. The same technology Janet had dismissed as a pipe dream was now protecting millions of users worldwide. Alex entered with more contracts requiring my signature. The board wants to discuss global expansion. And Thompson's requesting a meeting about his retirement package. Schedule the board for tomorrow, I said, signing the documents. As for Thompson, tell him I'm available next week. He can wait, just like I waited all those years for someone to take me seriously. That evening, as my private jet headed toward Singapore, I thought about the long road that had led here. Every dismissed idea, every condescending comment, every family dinner spent defending my choices, they'd all become stepping stones to this moment. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. Found this while cleaning. Thought you might want it. The attached photo showed a science fair project from my teenage years. A crude but ambitious attempt at encryption software. Dad had called it a hobby. Janet had called it cute. Now similar code, refined and evolved, was revolutionizing global cybersecurity. I typed a response. Keep it. Put it next to Janet's Corporate Achievement Awards. A reminder that success doesn't always wear a suit and tie. Looking out at the clouds, I smiled, thinking about next quarter's plans. Global tech was just the beginning. Soon, every major corporation would face a choice. Adapt to our standards or become vulnerable to the very threats we'd warned them about. And my family? They'd finally have to accept that their misguided daughter hadn't just found success. she'd redefined it. Their precious corporate ladder had become obsolete, replaced by something they'd never understood: true innovation. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd spent years telling me to get a real job, never realizing I was creating the future of work itself. Now their entire concept of corporate success reported to the daughter they'd underestimated. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself so right that they have no choice but to follow your lead. As my jet descended into Singapore, where eager tech leaders awaited my arrival, I couldn't help but think, sometimes a waste of time becomes the most valuable thing in the world. You just have to be brave enough to believe in it when no one else will. The Singapore meetings exceeded all expectations. By the time I returned to the States, Quantum Solutions had secured partnerships with 6 major Asian tech conglomerates. Our quantum encryption technology wasn't just changing global tech. It was reshaping the entire digital security landscape. Walking into Global Tech's headquarters, now featuring both our logos prominently displayed, I noticed the subtle changes. Employees who once barely acknowledged me now scrambled to open doors. The same executives who dismissed my warnings months ago practically bowed as I passed. "Ms. Walker," my assistant caught up with me. "The quarterly numbers are in. Global implementation has exceeded projections by 200%. Also, Janet's replacement is waiting in your office." I paused. "I didn't approve any replacement." "No, but your parents did. They're in there too." Interesting. I entered my office to find Mom, Dad, and a familiar face. My cousin David, Janet's husband's brother, wearing an ill-fitting suit and an eager expression. "Sarah." Mom stepped forward. "We thought, since Janet's position is open." "Let me stop you right there." I held up my hand. "First, Janet's former position no longer exists. We've completely restructured the security division. Second, what makes you think you have any say in our hiring decisions?"
I never thought I'd find peace in sawdust and wood shavings, but here I am at 35, running my fingers along a perfectly smooth mahogany surface while the evening sun streams through my workshop windows. The irony doesn't escape me. This waste of time, as my parents called it, has become my salvation and ultimately their downfall. Growing up in the Anderson household meant one thing. Appearances were everything. Mom and Dad built their luxury real estate empire from scratch, and they never let anyone forget it. Our mansion in the hills, the imported cars, the country club memberships, these weren't just possessions, they were statements. The Anderson name means excellence, Dad would say, straightening his Armani tie while examining his reflection. We don't settle for anything less. I was 13 when I first discovered woodworking in shop class. Mr. Peterson, my teacher, noticed how I lingered after class, fascinated by the way he could transform raw lumber into beautiful, functional pieces. "You've got a natural eye, Michael," he said, showing me how to use a lathe. Some people see wood as just material, but others, they see the potential inside. That summer, I spent every spare moment in Mr. Peterson's workshop, learning techniques, understanding different wood types, and making small projects. When I brought home my first creation, a delicately carved jewelry box for Mom, I thought they'd finally see that I had found my calling. "Oh, honey," Mom said, holding the box like it might bite her. "This is quaint, but surely you don't want to pursue this as more than a hobby. The Anderson name stands for luxury real estate, not—" She paused, wrinkling her nose. "Manual labor." Dad was less subtle. "No son of mine is going to be a glorified carpenter. You're going to college for business, then joining Anderson Properties. End of discussion." But it wasn't the end. Throughout high school, I maintained perfect grades, just to keep them off my back, while secretly apprenticing with Mr. Peterson on weekends. He became more than a mentor. He was the father figure who actually listened to my dreams instead of trying to reshape them into his own image. College was a battlefield of different expectations. I enrolled in business classes to appease my parents but took every woodworking and design course I could find. My dorm room became a mini workshop, much to my roommate's initial annoyance, though he changed his tune when my custom furniture pieces started selling to other students. "This is just a phase," Mom would say during our weekly calls. "Once you graduate and start working with your father, you'll understand the importance of maintaining our family's status." I graduated summa cum laude with a business degree, just as they wanted. But instead of joining Anderson Properties, I took my savings and the money I'd made from selling furniture in college and rented a small workshop space on the outskirts of town. The day I told them about my decision, Mom actually cried. Not proud tears. These were the tears of someone who felt personally betrayed. Dad's face turned that dangerous shade of red I remembered from childhood disappointments. "You want to throw away everything we've built?" he thundered. "We are Andersons. We sell multi-million-dollar properties. We don't build furniture like common laborers." "I'm not asking for your approval," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm informing you of my decision." "Then you're on your own," Dad snapped. "Don't come crawling back when this little rebellion fails." The first year was hard, harder than I'd ever want to admit to them. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, ate ramen noodles more often than not, and poured every cent I made back into the business. But slowly, steadily, my reputation grew. It started with custom pieces for local clients. Word of mouth spread, and soon I was getting commissions from neighboring cities. My modern take on traditional craftsmanship caught the eye of a home design magazine, and their feature article opened floodgates I never expected. Wealthy clients began commissioning entire homes' worth of furniture. Interior designers saw exclusive pieces for their high-end projects. My waiting list grew to months, then years. I expanded the workshop, hired skilled craftspeople who shared my vision, and opened a showroom in the city's arts district. Through it all, my parents maintained their distance, aside from the occasional passive-aggressive message through mutual acquaintances. "Such a shame about Michael," they'd say at their country club gatherings. "He had such potential." I was reviewing designs for a major hotel chain's custom furniture order when I received the call that would change everything. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. "Michael Anderson?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "This is Patricia Martinez from the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need to speak with you about Anderson Properties and your parents, Robert and Eleanor Anderson." The next few hours were a blur of revelations. Anderson Properties, that pinnacle of luxury real estate, was built on a foundation of sand. Years of fraudulent dealings, misappropriated client funds, and creative accounting had finally caught up with them. The SEC investigation was already underway, and the empire was crumbling. I hadn't even processed this information when my phone lit up with Mom's number. After 5 years of silence, seeing her name on my screen felt surreal. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. "Michael, darling," her voice had that forced brightness I remembered from childhood disasters. "We need to talk. Can you come to the house? It's important." I agreed to meet them that evening, more out of morbid curiosity than any sense of filial duty. As I drove up the familiar winding driveway to their mansion, I couldn't help but notice the property's signs of neglect. Untrimmed hedges, faded paint, a general air of decline that would have been unthinkable in my childhood. Mom and Dad were waiting in the living room, perched on their Italian leather sofa like actors in a play about wealthy people. But the glamour had worn thin. Dad's designer suit looked slightly frayed at the cuffs, Mom's jewelry seemed excessive rather than elegant, and there was a desperation in their eyes I'd never seen before. "Son," Dad began, attempting his old authoritative tone but falling short. "We find ourselves in a temporary financial situation." I held up my hand, cutting him off. "I know about the SEC investigation." They exchanged glances, and Mom leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Then you understand why we need your help. Just until this misunderstanding is sorted out." Misunderstanding? I couldn't help but laugh. "Is that what we're calling federal fraud charges now?" "Don't be dramatic," Dad snapped, but the effect was somewhat undermined by the slight tremor in his voice. "We need $2 million to cover some irregularities in the books. Once we get past this rough patch, we'll pay you back with interest." I sat there, stunned by their audacity. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You want $2 million from your son, the glorified carpenter, the one who's wasting his life on manual labor." "Well, we've heard your little furniture business is doing quite well," Mom said, trying to smile. "And family helps family, darling, you know that." "Family helps family," I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Where was that sentiment when I needed your support? When I was starting out? When I was struggling to make ends meet? That was different. Dad waved his hand dismissively. "That was you being stubborn, choosing a lower path. This is serious." I stood up, reaching into my jacket pocket. "You're right, this is serious, which is why I brought something to show you." From my jacket pocket, I pulled out a thick envelope and placed it on their imported marble coffee table, the same table where they'd once told me I was throwing my life away by pursuing woodworking. "What's this?" Mom asked, reaching for the envelope with manicured fingers that trembled slightly. "Open it." They leaned forward together, Dad's reading glasses perched on his nose as they examined the documents inside. I watched their faces change as comprehension dawned, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally, something close to horror. This can't be right," Dad stammered, shuffling through the papers again. "Oh, but it is," I said, standing up to look out their floor-to-ceiling windows. The view of the city below used to intimidate me as a child. Now it just seemed distant, like a photograph of someone else's life. Anderson Custom Furniture was acquired last month by Berkshire Matthews International for $87 million. Mom's hand flew to her throat, clutching her pearls, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood catastrophes. 87 million. But that's not all. I continued, turning back to face them. The deal includes keeping me on as CEO of the expanded luxury furniture division, with full creative control and a significant stake in the parent company. But, Dad's face had gone from red to pale, the papers shaking in his hands. "You make furniture. You work with your hands. This isn't possible." I couldn't help but laugh. "You never did understand what I was building, did you?" "Yes, I work with my hands. I also run a company that employs 50 master craftspeople, has showrooms in 3 cities, and a 2-year waiting list for custom pieces. My furniture is in hotels, museums, and celebrity homes across the country. That little hobby you mocked, it's now worth more than Anderson Properties ever was, even before your fraud came to light." They sat in stunned silence, the weight of their mistakes finally sinking in, the fraudulent dealings that were about to destroy them. The son they dismissed who now had the means to save them. The bitter irony of it all seemed to physically age them before my eyes. "So you'll help us?" Mom's voice was small, hopeful. "You can spare $2 million clearly. We're your parents, Michael. Despite everything." I held up my hand, stopping her. "I brought these documents for 2 reasons. First, to show you that success doesn't always look the way you think it should. And second, to make it perfectly clear that my refusal to help isn't about money. It's about choice." "What are you saying?" Dad's voice had lost its usual commanding tone. "I'm saying no. Not because I can't afford it, but because you need to face the consequences of your actions. Just like I had to face the consequences of mine when I chose this path." "But we'll lose everything," Mom wailed, mascara beginning to run down her cheeks. "The house, the cars, our reputation." "Yes," I nodded, "you will. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe it's time to learn what really matters." Dad stood up suddenly, his face darkening with familiar rage. "You ungrateful little. After everything we did for you, everything we sacrificed." "Sacrificed?" I cut him off, my voice sharp. "Let's talk about sacrifice. Let's talk about living on ramen noodles for a year while building my business. Let's talk about working 18-hour days until my hands bled. Let's talk about doing it all without a penny of support from my family because they were too ashamed of my chosen profession." They flinched at my words, but I wasn't finished. "You know what the difference is between us? When I sacrificed, it was for something real. Something I built with my own hands, something that brings beauty and value to the world. You sacrificed your integrity, your honesty, and ultimately your freedom, all for the appearance of success." A heavy silence fell over the room. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across their expensive furnishings. How many of these pieces, I wondered, had been bought with stolen money? What will happen to us?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "The SEC investigation will run its course. You'll probably face charges. You'll definitely lose the business and most of your assets." I stated these facts calmly, without malice. "But you won't be homeless." They looked up, hope flickering in their eyes. "I own a small apartment building near my workshop, one of my first real estate investments. Nothing luxurious, but clean and well-maintained. There's a ground floor unit that will be available next month. It's yours if you want it." "A ground floor apartment?" Mom looked aghast. "But what will people think?" "They'll think you're facing the consequences of your actions with whatever dignity you can muster," I replied. "The choice is yours." I stood to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and one more thing. The building's maintenance shop has a small woodworking area. If you're interested in learning, Dad, I know someone who teaches beginners. It's never too late to work with your hands. The next few months unfolded exactly as I predicted. The SEC investigation led to criminal charges. Anderson Properties was dissolved, its assets seized to repay defrauded clients. My parents' fall from grace was spectacular. It made the local news, filled society columns, and had their country club friends whispering behind raised hands. They did end up taking the apartment I offered, though not without considerable drama. Mom cried for days about having to sell her jewelry. Dad raged about the humiliation of living in a modest building. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to change. Maybe it was the reality of their situation sinking in, or maybe it was simply having no choice, but they started to adapt. Mom learned to cook instead of ordering in. Dad, to everyone's surprise, including his own, started spending time in the maintenance shop's woodworking area. It began with simple projects, a wobbly shelf that needed fixing, a broken picture frame. But soon he was there almost every day, learning to work with his hands for the first time in his life. He wasn't particularly good at it, but that wasn't the point. For the first time, he was creating something real. 6 months after they moved in, I received a package at my office. Inside was a crudely made wooden box, its joints uneven, its finish rough. But on the bottom, burned into the wood in shaky letters, was an inscription. To my son, I'm sorry. Love, Dad. I kept that box on my desk, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable things we create aren't physical objects, but the changes we make in ourselves. A year has passed since then. My parents aren't the same people they were, but maybe that's a good thing. Mom volunteers at a local food bank now, helping families in need. Dad continues his woodworking, making simple toys for children's charities. They live modestly but honestly, and there's a peace about them that all their wealth never brought. As for me, the business continues to grow, but I still spend time in the workshop every day, my hands covered in sawdust, creating something beautiful from raw wood. Last week, Dad asked if he could come watch me work sometime. Not to interfere, he said quickly, just to learn. You see things in the wood that I don't see yet. The wood always has a story to tell, I told him, echoing Mr. Peterson's words from so long ago. Sometimes you just have to be willing to listen. Yesterday, I received another package. This time it was a small wooden bird, its wings spread in flight. The craftsmanship was still amateur, but there was something honest about it, something real. The note attached read, "Sometimes the best view isn't from the top of the hill, but from the ground where you can see what really matters." Thank you for teaching us that, Mom and Dad. I placed the bird on my office windowsill, where the morning sun catches its wings. It's not perfect, but it's authentic, a symbol of the journey we've all taken. Sometimes I've learned revenge isn't about punishment at all. Sometimes it's about giving people the opportunity to become better versions of themselves, even if the path there isn't what anyone expected. The workshop still smells of sawdust and possibility, just like it did when I first started. But now sometimes when I'm working late, I hear the sound of tools from the maintenance shop below, and I smile, knowing that even the hardest woods can change their grain if given the chance to grow in a new direction. Sometimes the cruelest cuts come wrapped in politeness, like the handwritten note I received from my mother-in-law, Patricia Wellington, on expensive cream stationery, explaining why I wasn't welcome at her 40th wedding anniversary celebration. Dearest Olivia, while we'll always consider you family, we feel that given your current situation, it would be best if you didn't attend. We must consider the family's image, and a divorced single mother might make some of our guests uncomfortable. I'm sure you understand. I'm Olivia Wellington, 34, widow, not divorcee, despite what Patricia tells everyone, mother to 5-year-old Sophie, and apparently now a threat to the Wellington family's pristine reputation. My late husband Andrew had been the eldest Wellington son, heir to their real estate development empire and their proudest achievement, until he married me, the daughter of a high school teacher and a librarian. We'd met at NYU, where I was studying architecture and he was finishing his MBA. Our love story wasn't supposed to happen according to Patricia and Richard Wellington's carefully plotted life plan for their son. But you're the first person who sees me, not my trust fund, Andrew had said when he proposed. We married despite his parents' thinly veiled disapproval, and for 5 wonderful years, we built our own life. Andrew joined his father's company but insisted on working his way up rather than taking an executive position. I established my own architectural firm, specializing in sustainable urban development. Then came the accident, a rainy night, a drunk driver, and suddenly I was a widow at 32 with a 3-year-old daughter. The Wellingtons swooped in immediately, taking control of the funeral arrangements, the estate matters, everything. I was too grief-stricken to fight them. "Let us handle things," Patricia had said, her perfectly manicured hand patting mine. "You focus on Sophie." Looking back, I should have paid more attention to what they were handling. But between my grief, running my firm, and raising Sophie alone, I trusted them to do what was right. After all, they were family. For the first year after Andrew's death, they maintained a careful facade of support. Sunday dinners at their Manhattan penthouse, holiday invitations, even offering to watch Sophie occasionally. But everything changed when I started dating again. It wasn't anything serious, just coffee with Mark Chen, a client who'd hired my firm to design his new restaurant. But Patricia acted like I'd committed high treason. "Really, Olivia?" she'd said during one of our weekly dinners, her voice dripping with disapproval. "Dating already? What will people think?" "They'll think I'm a young widow trying to move forward," I'd replied, keeping my voice level for Sophie's sake as she played with her food nearby. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You have a responsibility to the Wellington name, and to Andrew's memory." The invitations stopped after that. Sophie still received birthday and Christmas gifts, but they were delivered by the family's housekeeper. I was gradually edited out of their lives, appearing in their carefully curated social media only when they needed to prove they were supporting their son's widow. Then came the anniversary party invitation, addressed only to Miss Sophie Wellington and Nanny, with that handwritten note explaining my exclusion. I might have accepted it, swallowed my pride for Sophie's sake, if it hadn't been for what I found that same evening. Sophie had been going through her daddy box, a collection of Andrew's things I'd put together to help her remember him. Among the photos and mementos was a USB drive I'd never seen before. Curious, I plugged it into my laptop after Sophie went to bed. Andrew's face filled the screen and my heart stopped. The video was dated 3 days before his accident. "Hi baby," he began, his familiar smile making my eyes well up. "If you're watching this, something's happened to me. I've discovered some things about the family business that, well, let's just say Dad and Mom aren't the upstanding citizens they pretend to be." I sat up straighter, my hands shaking as I turned up the volume. "They've been using the company to run a massive tax evasion scheme. Shell companies, fake charitable foundations, the works. I've gathered all the evidence and stored it securely. The password is Olivia Sophie Forever. See, those expensive coding classes you made me take weren't wasted." He leaned closer to the camera, his expression serious. "I'm meeting with them tomorrow to give them a chance to come clean. If they refuse, I'm going to the authorities. I know this will tear the family apart, but I have to do what's right. Sophie needs to grow up knowing her father stood for something." The video continued, detailing where he'd hidden the evidence and what he'd discovered. But it was his final words that broke me. "And live if anything happens to me. Don't let them push you aside. You're stronger than they know. You're a Wellington not because you married me, but because you embody everything this family was supposed to stand for. Integrity, courage, and real class, not the fake kind Mom parades around." I stayed up all night, following Andrew's instructions to access his hidden files. What I found was staggering. The Wellington real estate empire was built on fraud. They'd been evading taxes for decades, using charitable foundations as fronts for money laundering, and exploiting loopholes in real estate law to hide their activities. But there was more. Among the files was a copy of Richard Wellington's will, the real one, not the version their lawyers had shown me after Andrew's death. The difference was shocking. Andrew hadn't just been a beneficiary, he'd been named successor trustee of the family's main trust, with full control over the business empire. And according to both New York state law and the trust documents, that position now belonged to me, as his widow and Sophie's guardian. The Wellingtons had hidden this from me, using my grief to manipulate me into signing documents I hadn't properly read. Documents that, I now realize, had been carefully worded to maintain their control while appearing to protect Sophie's interests. No wonder they wanted to distance themselves from me. An independent daughter-in-law with full trustee powers was the last thing they needed. I made 3 calls that morning, one to my old law school roommate who'd become a forensic accountant, one to Andrew's college friend who now worked for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, and one to my own lawyer. "Maria," I said when my lawyer answered, "remember how you told me something felt off about those trust documents? Pull everything. We need to go through it all again." That afternoon, another engraved invitation arrived from Patricia, this one for a private family meeting before the anniversary party to discuss Sophie's future inheritance. The timing wasn't a coincidence. They needed my signature on some time-sensitive trust documents, according to the accompanying note. I RSVP'd immediately, my acceptance written on the same expensive stationery Patricia favored. "Dear Patricia, I'll be delighted to attend the family meeting. After all, we have so much to discuss about the future of the Wellington family legacy." What the Wellingtons didn't know was that their perfectly planned anniversary party was about to become a very different kind of family reunion. The Wellingtons' anniversary celebration was set to be the social event of the season. The Plaza Hotel's grandest ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland, with crystal chandeliers draped in silver and white orchids cascading from every surface. 200 of New York's elite would be gathering to celebrate Richard and Patricia's 40 years of perfect marriage. But first, there was the family meeting. I arrived early, dressed in one of Andrew's favorite outfits, a tailored black suit he'd said made me look like a corporate warrior queen. Sophie was with my parents for the weekend, safely away from what was about to unfold. The Wellingtons' private suite at the Plaza was already full when I arrived. Richard and Patricia held court from the center sofa, while their lawyer Howard Green arranged papers on the coffee table. Andrew's younger brother Michael and his wife stood by the window, trying to look disinterested but watching me carefully. "Olivia, dear," Patricia's smile was razor sharp. "How nice of you to come. Though I thought we'd been clear about the main celebration." "Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world," I interrupted smoothly, setting my briefcase on the table next to Howard's papers. "After all, we have so much to discuss about the family trust." Richard leaned forward, his businessman's instincts sensing something amiss. "The documents are straightforward, Olivia. Just some routine updates to Sophie's trust provisions. Howard has highlighted where you need to sign." I opened my briefcase and pulled out my own stack of papers. "Actually, I have some documents of my own to share. Starting with this, the real copy of Richard's will, the one that names Andrew as successor trustee of the Wellington Family Trust." The color drained from Patricia's perfectly made-up face. Richard's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his whiskey glass. Only Howard maintained his composure, though his eyes narrowed as he studied my face. "That's an old draft," he said smoothly. "It was superseded by the version you showed me after Andrew's death." I smiled, channeling Patricia's own sharp-edged expression. "The one you had me sign while I was still in shock, while you were also helpfully handling everything. Interesting timing, considering Andrew died just 3 days after confronting you about the tax fraud." The crystal tumbler slipped from Richard's hand, shattering on the marble floor. Michael stepped forward, his face dark with anger, but his wife caught his arm, something like recognition dawning in her eyes. "What exactly are you implying?" Patricia's voice had lost its society polish, taking on a dangerous edge. I pulled out my laptop and turned it to face them. "Why don't we let Andrew explain?" The video played in the silent room, Andrew's voice filling the space as he detailed his discoveries about the family's financial schemes. I watched their faces, Michael's growing horror, Patricia's carefully maintained mask cracking, Richard seeming to age years in minutes. When it finished, I stood. "Here's what's going to happen. First, you're going to publicly acknowledge me as the rightful trustee of the Wellington Family Trust, as is my legal right as Andrew's widow and Sophie's guardian. Second, you're going to start the process of making full restitution for your tax fraud, including turning yourselves into the authorities." "Or what?" Richard had found his voice, though it shook. "You'll destroy this family? Your daughter's inheritance?" "Sophie's real inheritance is her father's integrity," I said quietly, "and I'm not the one who destroyed this family. You did that when you chose fraud over honesty, appearances over truth, and control over love. I can destroy you," Patricia hissed, rising from the sofa. "One word from me and you'll never work in this city again. Who do you think will hire an architect who betrayed her husband's family?" "Actually," said a new voice from the doorway, "I think her reputation is about to get even better." We all turned to see James Chen, my client, the restaurant owner I'd had coffee with, standing there. But he wasn't alone. 2 FBI agents flanked him, and behind them stood Howard's junior partner, holding more files. Agent James Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Unit, he said, showing his badge. Ms. Wellington has been working with us to expose one of the largest real estate fraud schemes we've seen. Your anniversary party is about to have some unexpected guests. What followed was choreographed chaos. As the FBI agents read Richard and Patricia their rights, guests began arriving for the pre-party reception. The ballroom below filled with New York's finest, unaware of the drama unfolding upstairs. Patricia made one last attempt to maintain control. "We have 200 guests downstairs," she said as an agent prepared to handcuff her. "Important people. You can't do this now." "Actually," I cut in, "I think your guests deserve to know exactly who and what they've been celebrating." The scene in the ballroom would have been comedic if it weren't so tragic. Richard and Patricia Wellington, pillars of New York society, being led through their own anniversary party in handcuffs. Their carefully curated image crumbling as FBI agents explained the charges to shocked party guests. But something unexpected happened too. As the truth emerged, others began to speak up. Other developers who'd been pressured into participating in the Wellington schemes. Contractors who'd been forced to falsify invoices. Even Michael's wife revealed she'd suspected something was wrong but had been afraid to speak up. The aftermath reshaped more than just the Wellington family. The entire real estate development community underwent scrutiny. My architectural firm, known for its ethical practices, gained new respect and clients. The FBI's investigation expanded, uncovering similar schemes at other companies. 1 year later, I stood in the newly renovated Wellington building lobby. The first thing I'd done as trustee was rename the charitable foundation, establishing the Andrew Wellington Memorial Foundation for Ethics in Business. The second was to implement all the reforms Andrew had planned, turning the company into a model of sustainable ethical development. Michael and his wife became allies once they understood the full scope of his parents' actions. He now runs our commercial division with strict oversight and a commitment to transparency that would have made his brother proud. Sophie started first grade this fall. In her classroom's Family Heritage Project, she proudly displayed pictures of her father and wrote about how he stood up for what was right. "My daddy was a hero," she told her class. "And my mommy is too, because she made sure everybody knew the truth." Last week, I found another video file hidden in Andrew's old laptop. This one was different, just him playing with baby Sophie, teaching her to walk, both of them laughing. At the end, he turned to the camera. "Remember, princess, real strength isn't in what you have, but in what you choose to do with it." Patricia and Richard are serving their sentences at minimum security facilities. Their perfect society life is over, but something better has emerged from its ashes. The Wellington name now stands for integrity rather than wealth, for truth rather than appearance. Yesterday, we hosted our own celebration in the same Plaza Ballroom, the inaugural fundraiser for the Foundation Scholarship Program, helping underprivileged students study business ethics and sustainable development. The guest list was different from Patricia's carefully curated society crowd. These were people who shared Andrew's vision of business as a force for good. As I watched Sophie charm the guests, looking so much like her father with her bright smile and kind eyes, I touched the locket I always wear, the one with Andrew's picture inside. "We did it, love," I whispered. "We protected your legacy, the real one." The Wellington anniversary party that ended in arrests has become something of a legend in New York society. But its true significance isn't in the scandal or the social upheaval it caused. It's in the reminder that real family values, honesty, integrity, courage, matter more than any carefully maintained image. And sometimes the best revenge isn't in destroying what others built, but in building something better from the ruins they left behind.